All right, everybody. Welcome to the Bushin Lounge Radio Show. I'm your host, Jason Murray, and thank you so much for joining us. Episode 11. I can't believe we're already here at episode 11, and we're just beginning. Guys, I wanted to introduce you to one of my new upcoming friends. We met of all places on TikTok. I never thought, as tail end Gen Xer, that I would meet somebody on TikTok, but here we are today. And Brian Mauk is an insurance professional. He's been in the financial services industry for quite a long time. Started with a captive company and went into the brokerage scene and really has a wealth of information. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. So, Brian, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. And yeah, I'm Brian Mauk. I've been in the industry for about 8 years collectively at this point. And, I did have a starter company, and I think Jason and I share that as well. The good
We
old,
do.
not to pry, but, it's primary. How I always preface it,
Try.
just to kind of squeak in there a little bit. But no, we also have some other interesting, things in common, martial arts as well too, which is a really fascinating topic, and actually does have a lot of correlation in terms of how we conduct ourselves in business as well too. So that'll be
Absolutely. And
interesting.
yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that too. So
Awesome.
yeah. So Brian, go ahead and tell me about your what interested you the most when it came to financial services? What brought you into the industry?
I think it was discovering my starter company, which was Primerica. I'm assuming that was your starter as well.
It was. It
So
was.
in yeah. So in terms of that, it sparks something in you, and you do get excited, and you're like, okay, this is not just I'm being recruited to drive for Papa John's, or anything like that. You're actually There's an actual opportunity, and I think a lot of people don't think of it, or they even consider this industry because, I mean, Charles Schwab's not knocking at our door. So of
Right.
course, when we get introduced to Primerica, it's like, oh my gosh, wow, and we're just jazzed as all can be.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what it was with me. I was first introduced to Primerica back in 1999 at a college and career expo. And I didn't do anything with it, but it seemed kind of interesting. I was like, yeah, that's all right. And then few years later, I'm working at Starbucks. I'm a youth pastor part time, and I'm a martial arts instructor. Crazy trifecta right there going on there. But I this dude that never came into my store whatsoever just shows up out of the blue, right? And I was like, "Hey, I don't know you. What's your name?" Right? And he says, "Well, my name's Daryl." And I said, "Great, Daryl. I haven't seen you around here. Are you in the area?" And he's like, "No, I was riding my bike, and I got here." And I'm training for. I think he was training some triathlon or something like that. And I was like, "So where you from?" Sepulpa. And I was like, "Holy cow, Sepulpa and Broken Arrow on a bike is like a couple hours, okay?" so so he shows up there. I don't know if he rode the whole distance. I think he probably packed his bike in his car and then drove a little bit and just drove the area because he comes up and he was prospecting, okay? And so I said, "Okay, great. What do you want to drink? What can I make you?" And he says a vanilla latte. And I'm saying, do you want it hot? Do you want it cold? Do you want it middle? Do you want an extra shot? Do you want it sweet, half sweet? How do you want it? How does Daryl Coyer want this vanilla latte? And I didn't realize this, but I'm doing everything that we are taught in this industry. You hear it, right? I'm doing everything we're
Yep.
taught in this industry. If you're looking for somebody who's going to be good in this industry, you're going to find the guy that's doing what I was doing as a Starbucks barista. And then I said, hey, look, since it's your first time in our store, I'm going to make this for you. That was another thing, right? And so anyway, I didn't realize this. Back then, Starbucks wasn't public yet. So we were still being trained on the three principles of Howard Schultz, which was connect, discover, respond, right? Well, what does Tom Hopkins say? The quality of questions you ask determines the quality of appointments you'll have.
Quality.
Yep. 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 And so
Holds
anyway, we
true.
get there. I go on lunch break and Daryl Corey comes up to me and he says, hey man, I really appreciated how you served me. I haven't had anybody do that for me in a long time in a Starbucks. Hey, are you open to an opportunity if the money were right? And I was like, well, I mean, what do you got? And he says, you heard of asset management? I'm like, what the heck is that? I had no idea. I had no idea. But sure enough, it was Primerica. Long story short, it was Primerica. I stood him up for 3 weeks, not because I didn't want to go. It's because I had no idea how to run a schedule, right? No idea whatsoever. So I'm an action-oriented kind of guy and very, if I don't have my schedule in front of me, I'm all over the dadgum place, right? And
Yep.
so that's just
Oh
kind
yeah.
of part of my personality. That's part of who I am. It's like, and so I didn't know how to work a schedule. And so I stood him up for 3 weeks. He came back, no lie, came into my Starbucks for 3 weeks consistently, persistently, and patient. And then he said, hey, our RVP is making some barbecue at this event that we're having. And I was like, oh, hey, free barbecue. And I was like, what's going to be there? And he's like, he makes the best brisket you'll ever have. And I'm like, I'm there. Great state of Oklahoma. I want my brisket.
Yep.
Okay.
There you go. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Fresh
Yeah.
caught.
Yeah. I get there and Keith Hageman, who I still highly respect and highly honor, he was the best trainer I could have had in that company. Unbelievable. And he still tries to do it the A.L. Williams way, where compliance doesn't limit him, right? And so he is the reason Oklahoma probably has 82 RVPs. He
Wow.
is. Okay.
Very
He is.
impressive.
He was the reason his upline ended up with $1.2 million a year with only 12 RVPs. So so yeah,
Yeah.
he was the boss man of our deal. He's a legend in that old company. But he comes in and he's like, it's amazing when you can help a family across the kitchen table with their finances, and you can help them with their spiritual and mental life as well at the same time because they trusted you with the money. And I said, I'm in. I'm signing it. Best check I ever bounced. Best check I
There
ever
you
bounced.
go. Yep. Oh yeah.
Because of let's be honest, Brian. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't be where we're at today.
That's true. And I don't come here, slamming anybody. It's not slamming.
No, I
I'm yeah, no interest in that because that's just the bottom level. And if you're on the bottom level, then you're not very focused on your own business. But in retrospect, I mean, yeah, I'm grateful. And let me just preface it like this: I'm absolutely grateful for the opportunity I have been given in terms of my start in this industry, and with
exactly.
the 17 notebooks that I filled up and all the base shop meetings and everything, and just yeah, you keep penning the same things over and over and over, and but you learn a lot. It did introduce me to Tom Hopkins,
Oh
who
yeah.
was actually I'm actually from Scottsdale, Arizona, so I actually saw Tom Hopkins around a couple times. It was kind of cool. He lives in Phoenix. So yeah, interesting stuff. But
I
you
I
know,
want to have a I want to have a vacation place where you are, by the way. That's one of my goals.
yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, I'm not there right now. I'm going to be moving back soon, but yeah, moving back by next year, going back to Scottsdale. So can't wait.
I
But
bet. I bet.
yeah,
Go ahead.
but anyways, I just, again, not here to slam, but at the same time, I just wish This is one thing I kind of wish to anybody coming in as a newly licensed agent to this industry outside of the life exam. I wish there was a course that every new agent was required to take where it was just unbiased product training and unbiased look in terms of the business models that comprise this industry. So
Absolutely.
I'm going to lead with that, because if we can, ever accomplish something like that, that would clear up a lot, and it would really untarnish the reputation that this industry has kind of dug itself into.
Yeah, and it brought this it, because we didn't have that. It brought these two philosophies that are overtaking social media when it comes to life insurance, and that is buy term invest a difference or IUL investing, and it's blown out of proportion to where it's become um, uneducational and more product driven.
Yep.
When and I said this on a podcast that I was a guest on, and I said, look, if you only sell one product to your clients, see, A.O. Williams' rate book had 6 term products. Okay, what happened to that? What happened to that? If you want to claim your A.L. Williams still, why, when you broke away from Citigroup, the prison of Citigroup, right? And trust me, it was a prison when we were there. It really was. But it was still a prison because all we did was recreate the Citigroup term product. We didn't even go back to the A.L. Williams rate book, which was a little trifold little folder. There were more than 6 products on there, but you get what I'm saying. We didn't have like a
Yeah.
big ton of products like we do now as insurance brokers, but in the A.O. Williams rate book, you had several different term products to choose from. It wasn't just one term product. And see, even that I can get behind because you're not selling just one term product for anybody and everybody, for one group to get declined and one group to not get declined and such. And so anyway, and I'm not trashing the principles of the founding of Primerica. I'm trashing what it became because what it became was just like any other broker dealer corporation. That's why I left. Okay. That's why I left. When they pushed out Roy, I was all in one fell swoop. And I was sitting here going, wait a minute. Put millions of dollars into your company for 40 years. He was Dave Ramsey's business partner. He was Dave Ramsey was an RVP under him for 13 years. Dave won't talk about that, but that's in
Oh,
history.
never knew that.
That's in A.L. Williams history. Dave
Wow.
Ramsey was in Primerica for
Hmm.
13 years. He was an RVP under Roy Matlock Jr. And back in the day, Roy Matlock Jr. had a radio show, and Dave became his business partner on that radio show. And FINRA came in and said, you can't get clients anymore through the radio. So, well, I'm going to keep our A.L. Williams business going. And Dave's like, well, Art didn't make Hubert Humphreys the CEO and all that stuff, and he let Sandy Wild do all this stuff that he did. I'm out. At least that was my assumption anyway, because it was at that time that Dave left and kept the radio show. Now we know as the Dave Ramsey Show.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there was dots there that I didn't realize could be connected. I never knew
Yeah,
that. That's wild.
yeah.
Hmm.
So anyway,
Yeah.
there's that. But when Roy was pushed out, Ian Ian was pushed out, and Dean was pushed out. These were 3 guys that I looked up to that were my mentors, not just for our company and the business that we were in, but because they did everything they could to be ethically and morally sound with their creator God, right? Proper alignment with God. And I'm like, Why would you kick out somebody that seemed to be some of the most ethical people in business, right? And not push out the ones that are going skirting around your compliance rules and making the money, right? These guys weren't skirting around necessarily the compliance rules. Now they said they did, but they weren't. And on top of that, they were building other businesses and entities that were only adding value to their PFS business, right? And they said, well, we didn't want them to do that, and we didn't want them to. This is what they said in the ACM, the annual compliance meeting, is they said the president, who was a plant from Joe Plumeri, by the way, look it up. Joe Plumeri was the worst CEO of Primerica. Anyway, but yeah, yeah, I did my history.
Before my time.
Yeah, I did my history. I did my history. And so, anyway, this guy was hired on to be Primerica's attorney to keep them with Citigroup compliance, not Primerica wants and desires to go back to A.O. Williams models, but Citigroup compliance. Well, this guy is now the president of Primerica. And in the ACM, my last ACM, he said, you guys notice we pushed out 3 really wonderful guys to force them to sell their code. But what they were doing was they were doing a lot of outside business, and they were building other businesses and entities, and they were charging for it. Whereas we give all those resources for free here at Primerica, and they shouldn't be charging Primerica agents for that services. And I was like, number one, I know exactly who you're talking about. And he didn't push me to buy his product and service. He actually asked me if I wanted to be on his calls and his trainings on the Primerica side. The other people that were getting his coaching were business professionals. So don't twist what he's doing, right? But that's what they were doing. And they said,
Right.
and we pushed them out because nobody else should be really focusing on another business opportunity because we're the greatest and we're the best. And I was like
Oh,
reminded
yeah.
at that moment of a passage of scripture, and not only not only Christians quote it, but or Jewish people quote it, but people from all over the world quote it. Pride comes before destruction, arrogance before a fall. Those were the wise words from King Solomon. I just said, I got to get out. I got to get out.
Yeah.
Because what are they going to do to me when I rise up to the top and I start having the influence that they didn't want me to have in that? And what they did was they put their thumb on me. What did Art Williams always tell us?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting, though, because it's like the longer you're around, the more it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, when they finally get to meet the wizard and you see the man behind the curtain pulling all the levers and switches and smoke and all this stuff. And that's kind of what you find, not just with Primerica, but just a lot of different companies within the industry. And it's an unfortunate reality to where, you kind of there's just an underbelly, there's just something that's in a darker corner somewhere that's going on, and to whatever degree, to whatever level. But at the same time, you kind of have to make a morality judgment call in terms of what do you want to be a part of. Like, and even just personally with my experience with Primerica, I mean, and it's not all bad. I mean, there was some, there's a lot that actually helped me grow as a human being.
Oh,
There's
100%.
principles. Oh yeah, there were principles there that I picked up on, and just even just as quotes that I live by. Same with the martial arts. There's all kinds of life lessons there. It's not just about personal protection and defense, and it's about how we conduct ourselves. So if you have those principles and those things are strong and within you, and they are not going to be moved, you know that's your compass right there, and your compass is going to steer you right no matter about anybody else's indoctrination.
Yeah.
And so and there's also aspects of personal development that go into it. But as far as Primerica goes, you know the problem I was having, and I will preface this by saying I am not Mr. 6, 7 figure earner, you know. In fact, there's a
Right.
lot of value in being that guy that's in between, that's had some success, but it's not quite there yet, because this is a journey and we're all
It
on that
is.
journey. Everyone.
Well, and you got that's the black belt mindset. That's the
Yeah.
black belt mentality.
Yeah. So we share
And
that. Well, obviously. Okay, so this is really
yeah,
cool. I like that. Yeah. So I mean, but the problem, the thing I had a problem with, and I was getting into recruiting and bringing people in, starting to get people licensed. But the problem is that I started really realizing what I'm bringing people into, because myself included, and this is admission here, myself included, pie in my face. I was one of those, and this was in every base shop, and I was one of them. There are people that have been there for 2 and 3 years, go to every meeting, every Saturday training, every op night, go to the conventions, go to the recharges or whatever they want to call them, the local ones and the international ones. And you do this for years. And the thing that kind of got to me is myself and seeing people around me after 2 or 3 or 4 years still going into their job at Monday morning, punching that time clock. There is something inherently wrong there. And this is where I kind of started bucking the indoctrination, because there's always been this kind of undertow of, well, okay, if this is not working for you, you kind of need to blame yourself. You need to look at yourself. And I'm like, okay, I've done a lot of self introspection. I have that ability to do that. And am I perfect? No. But at the same time, you know what? And if you have this long, deep, illustrious, warm, natural market to play off of, and everybody trusts you again and again and again and again, yeah, it could probably work for you, as there are successful people in every company, and I'm not arguing that.
every company.
Of course,
You
of
know,
course.
you bring up a good point though. There's a guy that haggles me all the time on social media because I left and I'm exposing some things over there. Not in a and I'm my intent is not to do it in a in a incorrect way, but it made me mad for one thing, because not only was I lying to my clients, I was lying to myself, and I was lied to at the same time, and that's what I fight against. That's
Mm-hmm.
what I fight against. Okay,
Right.
it has nothing, but again, it's like there are a couple people that are still over there that are good friends of mine, and I'm not pushing them to come under me, right? I'm not
No.
at all. But this guy right here is haggling me, and you would assume he sounds like he's one of those that's making the top dollar over there, because that's how he
Mm-hmm.
portrays himself. The dude just hit 300 grand and he started in 98.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Think about that, guys. You're in the most lucrative industry in the entire world for over 100 years. Okay. To build generational wealth. And it took you 30 years to make
Yep.
only 300K, which is turning into middle class these days because of inflation.
Yep.
And you're talking to me like you're some flipping amazing giant. And so, I'm sorry, I just don't listen to guys like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I laugh. I laugh. And I remember Art Williams said, "All right, Art, I'm gonna go do it. Watch my smoke." That's what I believe that guy is.
Yeah.
Okay.
You see it a lot.
Yeah, watch my smoke. And here's another thing. I got so sick and tired of so many daggum broke RVPs. RVPs depending on their wives to go do real estate, depending on their wives to go do the medical field, depending on their wives to go sell cars. And I'm sitting there going, dude, an RVP contract should at the bare minimum pay you 125 grand a year, even at the low comp that company's at. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to do that. And I could be like you, Brian. I mean, there was a lot up in here, a lot of headspace up in here that I still need to work at. Shoot, I wasn't there. I'm not there yet either.
Yeah, of
But
course.
I've been more successful as an insurance broker than I ever was over there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's one of those things where it's like you can't see the forest through the trees, because it's like when I was like deep in, when I was with Primerica, I was willing to go to battle,
Oh,
and
me too.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah. See, bingo. Yeah. See, that's another thing. That was something that kind of tipped me off too. But yeah, uh-huh. It's like, okay, why do I want to go out and find some cash value agent and kick his ass? It's like, why do I want to do that? Why am I compelled? And I don't mean to be like that, and I never really was. But
So
at the same time,
Lorenzo,
I'm sorry,
You know Lorenzo on TikTok.
Lorenzo. Not sure.
Yeah. Anyway, he's in our network, our financial strategist network, right? Of all our financial strategists that we all hang out with and such on there. And Lorenzo was asking me, why are these guys so combatant? And I said,
Hmm.
we were not taught to reason. We were taught to go to war.
War. Yeah. Yeah.
We were.
Bingo.
And
Yeah.
there's a place for that. Don't get me
There
wrong,
is.
there's a place for that. But there's also a place to where if you treat somebody well, wouldn't you think you'd be able to recruit them a whole lot better? Not because of the comp, not because of the ownership, but because it's you.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Because because in the end, you and I could say comp doesn't matter because comp is just volume. If you think
Mm,
about it, comp is volume.
right.
I
Yeah, it
get all
is.
these guys saying, "Well, I make 170 comp," and I was like, "Great, I I could make 170 comp and do no business and still get zero."
Bingo. Oh yeah. Yep. There's different ways to peel that onion back.
Yeah, you know, and,
But I mean, yeah,
and
it's so, this is something that's interesting that happened to me too. In one of the base shops I was in, I saw someone become an RVP. They nailed it. They within 7 months. They
I
got after
love
it.
that.
They nailed it within
I love
7 months. And I'm just like, it was kind of kept under wraps a little bit. All of a sudden, you were just celebrating him becoming an RVP. I'm like, what the heck? What's going on here? Wow. All right, groovy. You go, man. You know, but the interesting thing is, he wasn't around for long, and
Oh, he was a match. He was a match.
yep, yeah, yeah, he was. But all of a sudden, he disappeared, and I found out he had went to another company. That's
Oh,
special.
wow.
He went to another company because I think what happened is he saw that the RVP contract, it's really not that much money. And and being aware of the rest of the industry, and you could match and beat the Primerica RVP contract just writing on your own pen.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know
yeah. Well, I'm
yeah,
at 100% at Experior, so
yeah,
and it's like a 10% difference with the RVPs,
yeah. So
right?
you've got this bloated position here where it's like, oh my gosh, and I've even had someone try to recruit me. This is funny, and it's like I should have been mad at the guy, but I couldn't, because I understand. I get that burning that they culminate inside of you. Yeah. So I had someone trying to recruit me recently into Primerica, and I told him I work for another company in the industry, and he did that confrontational thing. He kind of got his chest in my chest, and I'm like, "Whoa, dude, relax, man. I'm very ready for you if anything happens, but I let's not go there." It's like you learn
It's
to
like,
expect you go through life being a peaceful warrior, as you know, but at the same time, your peripheral's expecting anything, so therefore you can be prepared. But at the same time, this guy was just getting all puffy, like, "Oh yeah, you sell cash value?" And I'm like, "What?" It's like, dude, relax. But I calmed him down and I got him to a point where we were talking. And I'm like, "Dude, look, we're on different teams, but we're on the same team in this industry. Okay. There's just a
If
lot of
they if
division
they could
created."
if they could get their head wrapped around that,
Mm-hmm.
if they could, and when I came into the reality like 2 years ago, 2 years ago, of how everyone else in the industry is so kind. Like
Mm-hmm.
they don't care where I was, where I'm at. Now, if I say I grew up in Primerica, which I did, they're gonna be
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh no," and I said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I know, yeah, I know." But still, I'm again, it goes back to if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be where we're at today. But the beautiful thing is this, um, and is that if I can be the same person I was there
Yeah.
and grow to a level of of the generational wealth that I always dreamed about being 17 years ago, 18 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, um, then I'm doing the service not just for me, but for my agents, for my clients, and for the
Yeah.
industry as a whole. You know,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
and
Definitely. Definitely.
and if Primericans would be like, hey, look, you know, um, my client got denied over here. Jason, do you have something over here? Maybe we could do a joint venturing project. You could do that legally through the state guidelines because
Yep.
the state only requires you to have a license. Now, are you going to be the second writing agent? No, but I can help you out. I can buy you dinner. I can take you out. I can give you a vacation and an incentive of some type. I can even pay you a 35% commission or 40% commission with a signed document saying, "Hey, here you go. Here's a joint venturing contract for you," right? And I can do that because people are going to want a Primerica policy. I don't know why, but they do. People want a Primerica policy. Great.
Oh yeah.
Hey, my friend, one of my friends wants a Primerica policy. Will you help him out? And he's like, "Yeah. What do you need from it?" And I said, "Hey, man, just I don't want anything from that life insurance product, but if you can send it back over for maybe some of the fixed index annuities, or when I get my 65, a managed account, you know, or take me
Yep.
out to dinner, right?
Right.
Give me a cigar or coffee, whatever."
Exactly. Oh yeah. Very true. But just kind of moral of the story on this guy that tried to recruit me, it was funny because this is where you're kind of, after you're away from it, you understand a lot of the indoctrination. And when this guy was kind of just getting all puffy with me, and then we calmed down and everything. And, I asked him when we were in the heat of it, I'm like, "Are you an RVP?" He's like, "Uh-huh. I'm an RVP. Uh-huh." And I'm like, "Okay, brother. All right, man. You're an RVP. Right on." But fast forward 15 minutes later, when we're about to end our conversation, he hands me his business card and it says district on it. And I'm like, "I thought you said you're an RVP." He's like, "Oh, I got to get that changed." It's like, "Oh, okay, buddy." It's like, all right. So, and it's just like, that's where I said I should have been mad, but but I understand because they get you so like fever pitch, frothing at the mouth for RVP, 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 and, it's just, I mean, it takes fake it till you make it to a new level, unfortunately.
You know what I tell people who are still there and who still choose to be in Primerica is this.
Hmm.
I tell them, I tell them, stop focusing on the contract. Go write 100
Yeah.
grand on your own pen. I don't care
Bingo.
how you do it. Go write 100 grand on your own pen because that's where I'm
Hmm.
headed, right?
Yeah.
I'm headed to go write 100 grand on my own pen. And I'm not talking about 100 grand worth of premium. I'm talking about
Right.
go earn yourself 100 grand and then go
Hmm.
get the contract.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So if you,
You
yeah,
know?
I mean, and that's how I look at it now too. It's like, look, the way I work, I want to put my head down. I don't want to think about what I'm, commission. I don't want to think about anything. I mean, of course, you have to track that. You have to understand your numbers because that's the only way to be functional as an agent. But at the same time, what you really want to focus on is just, helping as many human beings and families as you can, to be able to put them in the best position how to, in terms of their financial future. So it's like it's like there's a process that needs to happen within ourselves where we need to fall in love with the business, fall in love with the sweat and the blood, sweat, and tears, and not so much the outcome, not so much the finish line. Because
Exactly.
it's interesting. When you really get busy, all that other shit disappears. It goes by the wayside because you're just like, okay, I'm doing this now. I'm making the car go. Here we go, And it actually makes it a lot easier, you know.
Right.
I do have one funny story. I have one funny story I want to tell you really quick here. Give it a few more
Yeah,
minutes
yeah.
and I got to jet. But anyways, it's not all bad. I mean, I still look upon my first Primerica convention as just a magical moment. It was really, really cool.
Oh my
You
gosh,
know,
yeah.
yeah, it's always that first one, and it's just like, oh wow, my gosh. But it wasn't so much even for that. It was like the peripheral and everything that was going on around me at that time. Because when I first, plopped in, that plane plopped down onto the tarmac in Atlanta, you know, we get off, we take the what was it, the L train, or was it the L, or whatever they call it there
Right.
in that area, yeah. And it was funny because it was just there was probably about 100 of us that got on this train, and all the locals were looking at us like, "What's going on?" you know. So it was pretty. It's like we're coming into this town and taking over. So it kind of
It
gave you
was
that camaraderie. And then we get there, and it's already nighttime, sort of like 8:30, almost 9 at night, and it's so cool, but so surreal because it was just foggy out and everything, and big buildings all around us. We were in Centennial Park. The Blues Travelers
okay.
were there putting on a free concert. And I'm just
Are
like,
you serious? Oh
yeah,
my
I'm
gosh.
like, this is so freaking awesome. This is like,
I
wow.
was there. I was there.
Seriously.
I was there. Yeah.
2003, I think that was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
I
now I
was
gave away how long I've been in this.
yeah.
But anyways, yeah, so I was, it was quite magical in that respect. And then there was other funny incidences like later that night when we went to the hotel, bar, lounge, whatever. Yeah, there was an incident there where, the Canadians, I guess, they love their liquor.
Oh
No
my
offense,
gosh. Yeah.
no offense to drunk Canadians, but ultimately, I mean, it was hilarious because we get to the table and there's these Canadians are like busting on us Americans, and like they're like, yeah, you don't even know how to write a policy. It's like, oh god, here we go. It's like,
Oh my
so they were just
gosh.
busting on us, and so there was a lot of lightheartedness, that I experienced as well, and for the most part, great people. But you know what? It's just, to be honest, and I got to cut this short in a few minutes here, but to be honest with you, the advice I want to give people is just do not be afraid, and please give yourself permission to lift your head up and look on the other side of the fence, because you know what? The grass may not be greener, or it may be greener, but at least it's not dying under your feet. And I think, yeah, you know, here's this is the one thing that really just that tipped the scale for me, is just bringing people in to a low starting comp, bringing people into justifying a 25 to 30% starting comp.
That may not have
Why
been
would you
bad in
do
the
that?
80s.
I'm sorry.
That that may not have been bad in the 80s and
Yeah,
the 90s and the
right.
70s, but But if you're still stuck on that comp and you're not going and innovating
Mhm.
with the way everyone else is going, you can't live off of that. You can't.
I
You're
know.
gonna have to. It's like you're gonna have to quit your job in order to do 20 policies at a 25%, 50% comp
Yep.
to the four policies I did last month, which generated 6 grand.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, and they were all term.
Mhm.
You know,
There you
so
go. There you go. And I just wish that, people would, wake up and be able to kind of buck the indoctrination, because and there's a lot of psychology there holding people in place. A lot. And it held me in place. Yep, bingo. It held me in place. Yeah, bingo. Oh yeah. Held me in place for a long time. And there's like this implied thing where it's like if you don't make it there, you're kind of a loser. And I'm like, I don't agree with that. You know, B- it's just
yeah,
keeping you in place to be a number. And there's value in that in Primerica too, to have as many greenies on the book as you possibly can, have as many solution numbers as you can. And see, that's the whole thing. It's just you're part of a herd of cattle where they're not really caring
yeah,
how much
and a
you're
lot,
struggling or how much you're making.
and quite frankly, there's still some good RVPs out there, but they're few and far
Yes, there are.
between because the new PFS agents coming in, just they recruit a ton of people, throw them against the wall, hope it sticks. They go write a ton of bad policies just to get a promotion, get a ton of chargebacks, and so guys, if you want to stay over there. The best advice I can tell you is go learn from a guy named Keith Hageman, Rusty Crossland, and Shane Rubman, and you know, go learn from those guys for a minute. But if you guys want to come
Yeah,
into the light, give us a call and talk to us. But I'm being ornery and facetious when I say that,
of
right?
course, of course.
But
Yeah, yeah.
but one last thing I wanted to say was. The reason our CEO left Primerica and created Experior Financial Group is because he was tired of selling the dream and living in the nightmare. And I see
Bingo.
way too many RVPs selling the dream and living in the nightmare. I looked them up. There are RVPs all over here making $30,000 or $40,000 a year. And you know what their excuse is? Well, I'd rather make $30,000 or $40,000 off my own pen than working it for somebody else. And I said, yeah, but you know what? There are guys just right down in the next door to you in the same office building that are making that a month. Why don't you go talk to them for a little bit and see, but how can you do that? How and it's everywhere. I get it,
Yeah,
but
of course.
why not go to a place a traditional business leader? And correct me if I'm wrong,
Hmm.
Brian. A traditional business leader would look at this and say, is is $125 a good investment for me um, to make 25% comp or to basically bust my butt hard with the possibility of making all this money, all these millions, all these everything, but it's going to take me 20 or 30 years? Or would I rather do the same thing with another group, become an insurance broker so that I can have the limitations of my clients being denied coverage, right?
Hmm.
And
Yep.
limit my options of getting a chargeback because carriers do not advance until it's issued and approved, then um, and pay the same or even less than that to join them. What would that smart billionaire and millionaire, what would they do?
Yep.
Has nothing to do with it being easier. And let me tell you something, it's
Nope. Nope.
not
No. No.
easier. It
No.
is
It's
not
not.
easier.
Not.
Uh, you
Mm-mm.
you think you need an office assistant when you're just running one product through one carrier. Get ready. When you
Mm-mm.
become a broker, you wish you had that office assistant right when you became a broker because you got
Yep.
like
Bingo.
12 contracts you're managing.
Yep. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. God. Just and real quick before I forget, this is interesting. Now, I don't know if anybody's gonna know who this is. If you're a metalhead like me into the heavy metal, you're gonna know. But there is, yeah. This is interesting because being from the Scottsdale area, I had heard a rumor, and yeah, I kind of just scuffed it off. I'm like, whatever, that's bullshit. It's just one of those stupid things, But I had heard rumor that somebody had recruited Dave Mustaine from Megadeth into Primerica and got him licensed. And I'm just like, that's nah bullshit. And then I heard it from the RVP in my office, and I'm like, really? And I still was
Well,
kind of like that.
you
That
do
doesn't make
know.
sense. He's worth like 20 million. Why would he need this? He's worth like 20, 30 million. Why? So I got curious, and I remember in the Primerica back office, you could actually plug in someone's name and actually find them if they were even at any point licensed.
Hmm.
Plugged in Dave Mustaine, sure enough, an outdated Phoenix phone number and address, and I'm like, holy crap! Somebody recruited him, and he got licensed.
I wonder if it was so Rusty Crossland, I think, has a place out in Scottsdale now. He moved out there. And then Mark and Sandy Yazapovic,
I
I
was with
wonder if
them.
it
I
was
was with them. That was my
okay.
there was my RVPs. Yep. It was Sandy that
Mark's a good
actually
guy.
said that.
Mark and Sandy's a good person. They're good
I
people.
love them. They're
I
they're
love them.
great. It's like when I express what I feel about Primerica, I do think of them, and I just like, it's like, I just wish this company would realize it's not 1986 anymore. They are not Amway, and just to kind of, give people a start in the industry where it's not just this included struggle, you know?
Right. Now, I do appreciate they're actually starting to get a little bit innovative and open
Hmm.
up the social media world because
Hmm.
when I was learning social media marketing and all that stuff and trying to market my business, uh, they put their thumb on me. I'd take everything down every time I
Yeah.
get something else, and then they wanted me to post something that was outdated by like 20 years.
Mhm.
I'm like, people don't talk like that anymore. People don't
Right.
say asset management. And here's the new crusade, guys. It's not buy term and invest the difference because you can do that everywhere now. You really can. Everywhere you can do that, except for like the carriers that are specific to certain products. Guys, listen. If you are if you only provide one product and you only provide one service in that product, then you're not client driven, you're product driven. You're not client driven, you're product driven. See, being a broker and being an insurance broker, you can be more client driven because you have the ability to service your clients. And if you're a good person, it's better they do it with you than do it with some scumbag trying to rip them off.
Right.
You know? And
That's
so,
true.
but but Brian, I appreciate our conversation. Tell me one thing about bringing your perspective with martial arts and
Oh yeah.
into our business, into our industry. And do you have just a couple more minutes to
Yeah, a
talk
couple
about
more
that?
minutes. Yeah. I was
Yeah,
wanting
yeah.
to. So, yeah, I kind of come from an interesting lineage. So back in Scottsdale, Arizona, I discovered a dojo. It was Traco International. So Tracy and Tom Connor.
Oh, you in
So
Kempo?
yeah, Kempo. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
Tom Connor,
Yeah.
Tracy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and it was interesting because there was always pictures of
See, guys,
Ed
only
Parker.
martial artists would pick up on that. Just saying.
Yeah, I know, I know. So this is going to be just kind of for us, for our like, oh, okay, but yeah, but I mean, people that it's like there was pictures of Elvis Presley and Ed Parker on our. There was a big frame poster on our wall with Ed
Yeah.
Parker and Elvis, and I didn't know the connection at the time, but then I learned it was Ed Parker who started the whole thing, trained Elvis, and Ed Parker was a part of the whole Traco thing as well too. So it was quite an interesting lineage. But I will impart one lesson that I learned early on as a white belt. Tom Connor probably within my first month,
Oh, wow.
month and a half.
You're dropping a name I haven't heard in years.
In a years, yes, definitely. But yeah, Tom Connor. Yeah. Interesting guy, man. Very interesting cat. But anyways, yeah, I was working out on the bag, one of the bags, and I was probably practicing the kimono grab or something basic. And then he came up to me and he said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? I'm working out on the bag." He's like, "Stop punching the bag." I'm like, and I was a sarcastic 14-year-old. I'm like, "This is not what this is here for." So, and he's like, "No, no, no, you're not understanding. You're not understanding." He said, "The thing is, what you're doing is you're punching the bag. Your fist is stopping at the canvas."
I
He's
knew
like,
exactly where this was going.
yeah, yeah. He literally said, "You know what? If you want to increase the strength of your punches, if you want to increase your effectivity of who you are as a human being, you need to visualize your hand going through that canvas, through the stuffing, and out the other side." He stopped. Stop punching the bag, punch through it.
Yeah.
And I again was like, duh, I was like a 14-year-old little punk, long haired punk ass, so I was like, "Oh, whatever, dude, right on, yeah. you know. But years later, I mean, it really became a metaphor for me. So it's like anytime you are in a tough spot in life, you're going through some like, punch through that thing. I
Amen.
don't care whether
Amen.
it's in this industry, your faith, anything. I mean, you need to visualize going through to the other side. Because if you're just going to stop at the canvas, you're not going to make your mark in life, and you need to. So anytime you're up against the wall, punch through it.
Yeah, great advice, guys. And whether you choose to stay with the company that Brian and I were a part of, or whether you don't, it doesn't matter where you're at. When you go through an obstacle and you need to get through that obstacle, um, punch through the bag.
Yep.
Punch.
That's all you
through
have
the
to do.
bag.
Punch through it. Go to the other side, and the rest of you will follow.
All
right, brother. On that note, I got to duck out.
Again, everybody, thank you so much for joining us on the Bushin Lounge Radio Show. And give regards to Brian Mauk. Thank you so much for being one of our special guests on episode 11. We're going to make this a part 1 because he and I have a lot more to say about really the positive things about the industry, what we can do for clients, and also martial arts. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. And stay tuned for next week's episode where we got Brian Nichols as our special